Ahead of the national budget next week, many stakeholders are anticipating what National Treasury will announce. One key area is that of tax, specifically excise tax, which has been the subject of much debate, especially during the COVID era. South African Breweries has been vocal to say that National Treasury needs to level the tax playing field, especially in this period of low economic growth and the higher cost of doing business amid persistent load shedding. Well, to get some perspective on some of the issues, I'm joined by Fatsani Banda. She's the Excise Tax and Public Policy Manager at SAB. A very good afternoon, Fatsani. Thank you very much for joining us. So before we get into the nitty-gritties, just explain, you're welcome, just explain to us how the excise tax is levied on SAB or the alcohol industry in general, and what the tax rate is.
So just as a starting point, as a principle, excise taxes are levied on high consumable products such as alcohol, taxes and fuel, and that's what we're expected to see ahead of the budget. So what you will see is that the primary function of excise taxes is to raise revenue for the state, and in particular for National Treasury. And as a secondary function, it is to deal with negative externalities as a result of the harmful consumption of such products. What we are seeing and what we are expecting is that the excise adjustment, which is basically what is to happen in the budget, should move in line with projected inflation. This is to the rand and cents, but in principle, whatever is projected as inflation for 2023 should be the guideline for what exactly the excise adjustment should be for this upcoming budget.
So let's come to the controversy. From where you sit, where is the unfairness in the way that your industry, or specifically SAB, is taxed?
Well, we wouldn't necessarily frame it as unfairness. I think our principled position is that there is an opportunity in the review of the excise policy, which is a systemic change in the nature and way the excise policy is shaped. The last time this has been done is in 2014, so that's about 9 years ago since this was reviewed. We think that there is an opportunity to harmonize and rationalize the tax system in line with the principles set by the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization has been very specific as to what that looks like. It has clearly stated for the best public health outcomes, all alcohol categories should be taxed in proportion to their alcohol content. So in line with the secondary function of excise taxes and the public policy framework, this is the position and the long-standing contribution that SAB has made in the consultative process that has been provided by National Treasury and SARS during the budget cycle. Of course, this is systemic, and we're hoping with a comprehensive review of the excise policy, this will be addressed. Although fundamentally, I think one of the secondary issues we have raised is that we need greater certainty in the way in which the excise adjustment moves every year. So every year over the last 10 years or so, it has been tracked that excise adjustments have moved above inflation, and we think that has made it difficult for our business to plan and invest. We are a business that is very keen to grow the base and our manufacturing base in South Africa, but the excise policy has an opportunity to create more predictability, and the National Treasury in particular has an opportunity to create more certainty for a business like ourselves that is very comprehensive in our manufacturing footprint in this country.
So, Fatsani, how has the burden of tax, as well as the burden of running a business at a higher cost, how has that impacted on your operations and your profitability? And as we speak now, is there a threat in your industry, or at least at your company, of job losses if the status quo continues?
Well, the status quo, as you may know, with any business and the way it's run, looks at a multiplicity of variables to determine whether there is operational efficiencies, profitability, and sustaining jobs. I mean, our Oxford Economics report showed how big our value chain is, amounting to almost 250,000 jobs. We have obviously a high tax contribution and GDP contribution to this country, but the inclination to give the nuances towards what the tax adjustment may mean to our business is definitely for our CEO to speak to after reviewing it. Of course, we've planned as a business in line with projected inflation, but what that that may mean in the upcoming budget is what we're expecting to hear. So there's still details that are uncertain, pointing to, alluding to the fact that greater certainty would do us best in planning for profitability, costs throughout our operations, and sustaining jobs across our value chain and in our business. But without that, and looking forward to the budget, we may perhaps get more clarity from our CEO as to what that would look like.
So you did quote what the World Health Organization says about what would be a fair and equitable way to tax the industry. So come February the 22nd, what are you hoping that the finance minister will say in this environment of low growth and where the fiscus is struggling to actually raise revenue itself?
Well, there's two parts to it, essentially. Firstly, we don't expect the minister to directly deal with systemic issues. That is an ongoing conversation with National Treasury as to how we can move forward in the space of the excise policy and what needs to change. Coming to next week's budget expectations, we do hope in line with the macroeconomic environment and the high inflation context that the Minister of Finance will be prudent in the use of tax instruments, given the fact that our medium-term outlook is that we have a very great fiscal discipline story, given our estimates from last year going into this year's budgeting process. We are hoping to see an excise adjustment that is in line with projected inflation stated by the Reserve Bank at 5.4%. So that's what we're working towards. We are hoping that the fiscal planning process with National Treasury and SARS will be in line with those sentiments.
Fatsani, thank you very much. A pleasure speaking to you. Fatsani Banda, she's the Excise Tax and Public Policy Manager at SAB.